Good evening, everybody, to the 8 Simple Steps weekly series. Why are you an entrepreneur? Talking about the trials and triumphs of the journey. I'm Maureen Edwards. I'm the founder of 8 Simple Steps. And for those of you just tuning in for the first time, I work with entrepreneurs, whether they're starting their business, building their business, or scaling their business, or possibly even turning it around. I remove the complexity, the overwhelm, and the mistakes in the process, and we do it all in 8 Simple Steps. And this series that I've been bringing every week is not only to highlight rockstar entrepreneurs, but their experience has been invaluable for other entrepreneurs who are walking the journey with them. So the wisdom they bring every week is just amazing. And this is no exception. I have another rock star, just like I do every week, but there's a little bit of a twist. So I want to welcome Holly Totten, who is the podcast creator and host of Teaching Yourself to Learn. She also has an amazing writing business called Writably Notable. I think I got it. So welcome, Holly.
Thank you, Maureen. I am so excited to be here today with you.
I'm so excited to have you, and for many reasons. But when we first met in Clubhouse, it seems like I say that every week. Oh, it's Clubhouse. So for anybody out there, Clubhouse may be a good place to connect with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
One of the things that we were talking about is that, well, entrepreneurship today, the majority of people who are going into it are actually over 50, who have either been displaced in the marketplace, the industry they're working in, or they want control of their destiny and want to go ahead and follow their passion, their mission. And when I met you, your podcast is about the third half of your life. And what are you going to do with it? What are you going to make of it? And for you, you became an entrepreneur. And it kind of follows suit, but it was a little bit different. So explain to me what you were doing before you were an entrepreneur.
I will, Maureen. I was a teacher. I taught for 32 years and loved every minute of it. That's all I ever wanted to do. And when I retired, I actually retired after 30 years. And I'm going to say it was kind of a forced retirement. And it was due to an illness with my husband, who is well now. But at the time when my 30-year mark came up, when I could retire, he had been diagnosed with cancer, and we just didn't know what our future was going to hold. And there was a lot of other things going on at that time in my life as well. And so together we decided within probably about a 48-hour period that I should go ahead and retire and this was like at the beginning of May. And so the retirement for teachers is at the end of the year, typically, the end of May. So it was a very quick decision, not really something I had considered. I really thought I would teach for a few more years. So I did that. And by the time the school year rolled around again, everything had kind of leveled out and he was going to be fine. And the school district asked me if I would come back part-time and be the librarian. So I did. I taught English. And so I did. So I did that for 2 years part-time. And then my daughter and her husband got pregnant. So I retired again and started keeping my grandkids. So I really didn't intend to retire when I did. And all of that, everything that was going on at that time of my life and, retiring without really being ready and then going back part-time, just all of those situations kind of put me in just kind of an unknowing of what my future was going to be because I hadn't taken the time to plan it out. It wasn't necessarily a horrible thing by any means, but just very uncertain. And when I retired again to keep my grandkids, I was 54 at the time, I guess, and which is fairly young.
Very young. Very young.
And I knew I still had a lot left to give and a lot to offer. And so I decided then that through the podcast and then the writing that I could still help people, which is really going into teaching. That's what I wanted to do, was to help. And so through the podcast and through my writing business, I can do that. And basically what both of those aim at are helping women tell their stories to motivate others stepping into this third half of life to find the beauty in it. Things are different because we don't get to be whatever age we are without having gone through things. And when you go through something, you don't come out the same person on the other side. But oh, go ahead.
Well, no, your story is really echoing what's going out there, because some people were not expecting to retire, just like they weren't expecting to not be able to get another job in their industry. And, it was by choice for you, which is a lot of people. But then it's like, now what? I mean, that is really young to retire. 54. Yes. It isn't a third half, the third act. Isn't that like the second act?
Well, I call it the third half.
The third act. I was wondering that. I'm like, I got to ask her this, because isn't that the second half of life?
Well, kind of, but and I'm 58 now, so that's been a little bit, and really the third half, I kind of count as like your childhood and growing up, kind of the first half. And then, you're married and going to a career, whatever that looks like, have children. And then that kind of comes to an end, and then you start something new. So this is, that's where the third half came from. It's not necessarily in numbers of years. It's basically what you're doing. And I wanted to keep my grandchildren because my mother kept mine. And that's just something that I always wanted to do. And in order to do that and still, still be productive and help others, I was going to have to do my own thing, which is where the entrepreneurship came in.
So tell me, how do you like being an entrepreneur versus, I'm not saying you came from corporate, but you were a public servant, a government employee, and then to go from that to entrepreneurship. Was that a tough adjustment? God, you still retired, but they're completely two different things.
It is. Yes, they are. It is completely different. And it's been an adjustment. I will tell you. I really love the entrepreneurship, and I feel like I'm kind of getting into my groove now, understanding how to manage my time. And the networking is different, because in a school system, your people are there with you. And in entrepreneurship, you have to find them, and through Clubhouse and online and, summits and, things like that. I'm losing my words, but you have to go out and find your people, find your community. And that's a little bit different for me, but I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it is really all about reaching your right fit person who you've created a business to serve, and influencing them, which is having those conversations and getting out elevating your authority in what you do, and then acquiring them. I mean, this is what everybody has to deal with. It doesn't matter what industry, what job, what anything, whether even corporate, they're doing the same thing. It is, the hardest thing. But I think for entrepreneurs, especially if you're just starting, it's like, where do I go? So that's a huge learning curve. So what's been the biggest learning curve for you?
Actually, I think there's two. And one of them has been learning to manage money in your own business. That's been difficult for me because it's not something I ever had. I just got a paycheck, every month, and I worked for it, but this is different. I'm having to manage the money that goes along with a business, and that's been difficult. And then the other thing I think has been difficult for me was finding my community, and I have done that, and it's wonderful, but it took a little while to actually find it. And so it was hard to reach out to people.
Yeah. So finances, it's always tough, especially if it isn't like the operations part, that whole financial accounting thing. If it isn't your jam, you don't want to do something you don't like to do, right? But it's so necessary, and to get your pricing right, so you got more money coming in than your expenses, that sort of thing. So I can get that. But what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are in the same situation about having to find their people, find their network? You've done very well with Clubhouse. Are there some other platforms that you have been fortunate to build relationships on?
I have. And of course, Clubhouse, I can't sing its praises enough. And if, that would be a big recommendation for me to anyone, is to get on Clubhouse and search for, and even for me on Clubhouse, it took a little while to find the right rooms, the right people. But once I did, I knew it, knew it instantly. And so it's been a blessing, a big blessing. But, I just my other socials, through Instagram. I did not have an Instagram account until I got on Clubhouse, because I
Yep.
had to have one for Clubhouse.
Mhm.
And I have really found that my community has grown through Instagram a lot, and a lot more than I was ever expecting. And so I would say those two socials, and then just reaching out to people in your community, finding, groups. And I have like spoken to a group here in town that's small business people in town. There are groups, and, where you can get out and meet people face to face. And I encourage that as well. I think that's important.
Yeah, I love to hear that, because I think people get stuck in the digital world, and that's only part of it. That's like the digital marketing, but you've got to have some traditional in there, and that is face-to-face conferences, face-to-face, chamber of commerce events, or whatever it is. Get out there with your business card. And I think a lot of people don't do that. I think they get nervous with it, or they figure they're going to get everybody on social media, but not everybody's on social media. Is that like a revelation there? They really are. You got to get out. So,
and I wasn't until like I said, until I got on Clubhouse. So,
yeah. So what has been your greatest success as of now as an entrepreneur?
I'm going to say again, there's two. One of them is growing my podcast. I have thoroughly enjoyed growing the audience, because I get new listeners all the time. And I don't get a lot of feedback, because when you go on and look, and so getting the feedback, I don't really get, but I know how many there are, and it's growing. And I really take that as a success, because that is something. This time last year, I was just beginning to entertain the thought of even doing a podcast. And so it's grown, so that's, and I really feel like I'm reaching some people, which is what I wanted to do. That was my main goal.
And what I love about the fact that you did a podcast is, I have to be honest, I work with entrepreneurs all the time who are over 50 starting businesses, and technology is a little bit intimidating for them. Let's face it, we didn't grow up with an iPad in our crib. And so I give you a ton of credit doing a podcast. I don't want people to feel like it's intimidating. Like, anybody can set this up if they just kind of do it in a simple, slow way, and they can multiply their impact. So I'm glad that you're saying, the podcast has been really successful for you in getting your message out there, and that you weren't like intimidated to go ahead and start that. I have no intention of doing a podcast. I have told the world, this is it for me.
This is as far as it goes.
This is my message, everybody. So what are some of the topics that you talk about on your podcast?
I've had a wide variety of, and it's all been women. And I'm not going to say that it will always just be women, but as of right now, it has been. And I have met some of the neatest people, Maureen. But most of the topics are people that have gone through some type of a change in their life, some type of a struggle of some kind, or just a change, and then started a business later in life, or expanded their business, or just, made a complete change into what they're doing, and maybe even in the corporate world. But talking about how they did that, the steps that they took, and how and some of them that had struggles, how they found their way out of their struggles, and knew that even though, things change, they can still be beautiful on the other side, And so that's basically, that's the big picture. But, I've talked to all kinds of people. The list is endless. I don't, it's just been a wide array.
So in your business, so that's the podcast, and it seems like it's been a lot of women, but who are your clients for Rightly?
Rightly notable.
Why am I having trouble with it?
Rightly notable. Yes.
Rightly notable. Who do you focus in on there? It isn't just women, right?
It's not just women. No, it's anyone really needing to tell their story or wanting to tell their story. And I have helped people write their books, and so far it's all been personal stories, but it doesn't, and that's just really kind of the way it's fallen, but it doesn't really have to be. It's just nonfiction. I really don't do anything with fiction. It's all nonfiction, and nonfiction can be how-tos, for business or gardening or, whatever, but there's a structure, and, those are the things we talk about. And I have done a little bit of ghostwriting, but I will tell you what I really prefer. And I do editing as well. And I absolutely love to edit. That's just something that comes very natural to me. And I think it's from teaching that for 32 years and editing my students' work. But one of the things that I really love to do is helping people learn how to write. The ones that are wanting to write, but they don't know how, they're not sure how to approach it, what to do. They're not sure of themselves. And I take them through the steps and help them with that. And when they're done, they're an author, and it's very rewarding.
That's amazing. You're right. A lot of people are not great writers, and they're intimidated by it, but it's such a powerful message. I mean, you have to be able to get your message across, and especially if you do want to write a book. I think maybe some people are intimidated that they're not good writers and they can't write a book.
Right.
And so there was something that you said that really struck me. And so what is the tagline that you say to people? Because I think this is awesome, and I know you're going to be trademarking it.
I am.
I just want to let everybody know she owns it.
Yes.
And so I think you just nailed it.
I do. I use this with my podcast and in Rightly Notable both. And my tagline is that I encourage you to share your words and share your story, because you never know who needs to hear exactly what you have to say.
And I believe you let people know that not everybody is a writer.
Okay, there's another one. Yes, my other tagline is I honestly believe that not everyone is a writer, but everyone can be an author.
Love it. Yes. Love
yes.
that, because I think it gives people confidence that you don't have to be an English teacher to go ahead and be able to, really impact people with a book. I know I'm working on one, and what's intimidating to me is having somebody be able to capture my voice and my words. So, as an editor, we've talked about it, and I love the fact that you keep the integrity of the author, but you clean it up, right?
Yes. When somebody is telling their story, it has got to come from them and from their perspective and their voice. And so when you are helping someone with that, you've got to know how to do that, how to help them keep their voice in it, keep their language, keep their words. That's important to get their story across. And, and our stories are so powerful, Maureen, even though they may not seem that powerful to us. And like I say, you never know who needs to hear it, and as long as it can help someone, man, it's got to get out there.
So if you were to give words of wisdom to other entrepreneurs who are contemplating taking this on, they may be a little bit scared, what would you say to them to make them feel better about making the decision?
That's a great question. I would just say, don't be afraid. You've done things in your life, especially, by the time you're midlife and in your third half of life, you've done things that are scary. Step out there. And I have found that in this part of my life, I am more willing to take risks than ever before. And I don't know if it's because my family isn't as dependent on it. It's more just my husband and I, that kind of thing. But I would say you are worth the risk. And, don't be afraid to step out and do it, and ask for help. Find your community and ask for help. That would be nice. And, when I started my podcast, it was one of those things I kept talking about. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And it finally got to the point where I was going to be so disappointed in myself if I didn't get it out there. And that's when I knew I had to.
Yeah.
So, when you feel that desire, it's time.
Well, it's like, what's scarier, like the fear of failure or regret? Like, right?
Yes,
You would have
exactly.
regretted it
Yes,
the
yes.
whole time. And the years go by really fast. I think
I
we can
do.
both agree. And then it's like 1 year and then 2 years, and you're like, I still don't have this done. Why didn't I do it 2 years ago? So
Right,
for people
right.
out there, do not delay,
Yes,
just
yeah.
just go ahead and do it.
Well, and
So
I think about when I was in my 20s not doing things, I felt like, I had years and years, and now I don't feel like I have years and years. I'm trying to get on the stick, get it going.
So do you think that there are more challenges in entrepreneurship in that third half of your life compared to when you're younger? Do you think it's harder to do it?
I'm going to say no. I really am going to say no. Because I think for me, I am one of those people that my whole life I've been, when I was a child, I was selling my stories to my parents and my aunt, and just, small things throughout my whole life. I've always tried to be an entrepreneur of some kind, but life happened. And I wanted to teach, I always wanted to be a teacher, but, there was just so many things in my way to keep me from taking the time to really learn to know what I needed to do. Maybe it's just because I have that time now, you know, but and it may be, I don't know. My answer to that is going to be no. I think it's probably if you have the time and, the want to, I think you can. So,
And you tapped into what you are good at and
right.
identified what people need. And
Yeah.
so people just maybe have to be a little bit reflective and thoughtful about the talent and
Right.
the skills they have and how they can
Yes.
maximize it
And
out there.
through my all of my guests in my podcast, I'm finding a very similar strain, and that the things that they've done in their life up to this point have set them up for what they're doing now without even knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the same way. My teaching of writing, and helping others, it has set me up to where I am now. So I think if people will look at that and see what they're good at, it will, it'll help.
So, is there a book by Holly Totten in your future?
I do have there is not one yet. I have not written one story, but I do have a couple in my, and one of them's actually a fiction book, even though I said that's not something that I teach, because I don't. I concentrate on the nonfiction. But yes, there are, I would expect that, I'm going to say, within the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so I don't know what the topics are, but can I throw one out
Sure.
that I think you would be great about?
Sure.
And talking about becoming an entrepreneur at that third stage in your life.
Okay.
And I think people need to hear that career is not over. Being
Right.
productive is not over if you've been displaced and forced into retirement, or you have retired by choice. Sometimes people go kicking and screaming being an entrepreneur, and it's like, all right, maybe you should just embrace it in that third half, and really talking to them about, the journey may be challenging, but it's incredibly rewarding, and maybe they should just embrace it. So maybe that's a concept
That is a good idea. That is not one that has been in my mind for a long time, but I'm not going to say I haven't thought about it, because I have. So, yeah.
Well, you have so much knowledge about it that I think it could be really, really helpful.
And, I going into this entrepreneur journey and this time of my life, I'm just at, and I'm not saying everything's been easy, because it hasn't. It's hard. It is hard at times, but I just have a peace with what I'm doing, and I just love it. I mean, it just, everything from the podcast to the writing business, to the people, I really do. I'm enjoying every step of the way, even the struggles.
So, what is the vision for your company? I know it's relatively new, and I know you're trying to make your way with your podcast and reach a broader audience, and of course connect with clients who want to get their voice out with their book. But where do you see the company going in the next couple of years? What's your vision for this?
That's a great question, because I have been working on that. I really see the podcast and the writing business, coming together, because they both serve the same group of people, basically. They both serve the same purpose, and that is helping people tell their story, helping people write their, tell it and write it. And so, on a podcast, you can tell the story and we talk about it, but through the writing company, we can really write the story and get the whole thing out there for people. So I really see those two being married, and just helping a lot of stories get out for people.
I think that is great. I can definitely see you scaling in that direction. Mm-hmm. So how can people get in contact with you? Okay. Can you share your social media platforms for everybody first?
Yes. Okay. So on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, it's all under just Holly Totten. Okay. Facebook, there is also, you can find it under Teaching Yourself to Learn as well.
Okay, great. And what's your website?
My website is teachingyourselftolearn.com. Okay. And it encompasses the podcast and the writing business. And I would love for you to visit it. I'm very proud of it.
That's the step. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they will know your services there, and they can contact you there.
Yes.
So I have one final question for you, because I think this is super important. Okay. I'm sure there are people who do what you do, Holly. Okay. Mm-hmm. I want to know, and I want people out there who are your potential clients, mm-hmm. what makes you different in your position?
I think one thing that sets me apart and makes me different is the fact that I have been where a lot of people are. I have, it may be different, not the exact situation, but made this journey. And I have a compassion for people and a passion for people. I have both, a compassion for the people and a passion to help them tell their stories and help others. And that's really what drives both things, is the fact that I really want to help. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes me stand out amongst other people in the business.
That's awesome. I'm glad you have that competitive differentiator. I ask that on every clubhouse. And we know, some friends of ours that, kind of chuckle about it, but I think it's super important that you let people know, when they meet you and they pick you, mm-hmm. like we talk about, they're going to get something special. And I'm going to say that to everybody out there. I know Holly. I hear her every day on Clubhouse. I can't say I see her. But if you want to connect to her, please go ahead and reach out to her. Yes. And Holly, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, and, sharing to people who are in your position, in your age group, who have had that similar parallel, that you gave them some inspiration and some big things to think about. Yeah. And so I really appreciate you sharing that and sharing it honestly.
Yes. And I appreciate your time and having me as a guest. I've thoroughly enjoyed the time with you.
Well, I have too. And I'm hoping you're going to come back as you find that your company is building, mm-hmm. and maybe you will have your book to launch as well.
So there we go.
I think we'll be full circle coming back.
Yeah, that would be great.
Good. Well, everybody, that pretty much sums it up for this Thursday and our rock star, Holly Totten. We will be back next week with another entrepreneur who will share why they're doing this, why they're walking this journey, and some of the trials, the triumphs, why they embrace it, and some wisdom out there for all of you who are doing the exact same thing. So I'm Maureen Edwards with 8 Simple Steps, and we will see you next Thursday. Bye, everybody.